The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character. My mom kept slicing the meat on the cutting board and didn't pause even for a second when she said it. Your sister and her children will always matter the most. You will always come last. She spoke the words as calmly as someone discussing dinner plans. My dad simply nodded his head slowly, like he was agreeing with a weather forecast instead of confirming something that sounded like a lifelong verdict. I didn't argue with them. I didn't raise my voice or demand an explanation. I just said, it's useful to know that. That was the exact moment I stopped hoping they would ever make space for me at their table. I quietly pulled back everything I had been giving, my money, my time, my effort. I decided I would build my own life and create a future that didn't depend on them. Just when the silence between us finally felt natural, when the distance stopped hurting and simply became reality, a major family crisis crashed into their lives harder than any of us expected. They came to my front door together, convinced I would welcome them inside like nothing had changed. But I grew up in a home where there was an invisible ranking system built into the walls. You could sense it in small ways. The sound of footsteps down the hallway seemed to change depending on who was walking. Conversations became louder and more energetic when certain people entered a room, but when I stepped in, voices often dropped and the excitement faded. No one ever said these things out loud. They didn't need to. The hierarchy existed in the tiny details. When my sister turned 17, the front yard of our house looked like a celebration scene. My parents had parked a brand new car beneath the streetlight, the paint shining brightly under the glow. They stood beside it with a camera ready, waiting to capture the moment. From the window of my room upstairs, I watched them hand her the keys. My mom's voice was full of pride. Your future is something we want to invest in, she said. 6 months later, it was my 17th birthday. The kitchen light buzzed quietly above a small cake sitting on the counter. There were no candles, no surprise waiting outside. My dad slid a plain greeting card across the table. We're proud of you, the printed message inside said. I smiled anyway. I already understood how the script worked. My sister got the spotlight. I got a polite nod. School followed the same pattern. My sister received checks for her tuition, her books, and her apartment near campus. When it was my turn, I received a lecture about responsibility and how satisfying it is to pay your own way through life. You're very independent, my mom told me, saying it in a tone that made it sound like a strange decision I had chosen for myself. You do just fine on your own, so that's exactly what I did. I stocked shelves in grocery stores before sunrise and completed computer work for clients late at night. Every dollar I earned went towards saving for a community college education. I still remember standing in the break room during my final shift before the fall semester started. There was a refrigerator there where employees pinned pictures and notes. Someone had placed a photo of their family vacation on the door. It showed bright beaches and smiling people standing close together with their arms around each other. Looking at that picture made me realize something. My sister had entire albums filled with memories like that. I didn't even have a single family photo after the age of 14 where I wasn't standing on the far edge of the group, almost outside the frame. The day I finished my 2-year degree arrived quietly and disappeared just as quickly. My parents weren't there. They had traveled out of town for my sister's baby shower that weekend. I walked across the stage alone in a room full of strangers. After the ceremony, I called them. My mom answered while she was running errands. That's wonderful, honey, she said. But before the conversation could continue, she mentioned that my sister had started experiencing early contractions and they were helping her pack a hospital bag. I'll call you later, she promised. She never did. When I transferred to a state university with the help of a partial scholarship, they called it a nice little achievement. But when my sister got married, the entire family treated it like the biggest celebration of the decade. They moved through the reception hall like they owned the building. I stood near the refreshment table while relatives told me how lucky I was to have a sister with such a perfect life. They spoke as if her success somehow improved my own story. It didn't, not even a little. After finishing my architecture degree, after years of sleepless nights, endless work, and choosing survival over comfort more times than I could count, I waited to see if anyone would notice. My mom said good job while pouring juice for her toddler grandchild. My dad asked if I had found a job yet while my brother-in-law loudly discussed the details of his mortgage. No one asked how I managed to accomplish everything alone. No one wondered what my plans were for the future. By then, I had already learned not to wait for them to make space for me. Instead, I built my own space. It started small with a careful budget, a few investments, and a modest apartment filled with soft morning sunlight. My name might not have been displayed on the wall beside the family photographs, but it was finally written on my own lease and my own future. Looking back now, the pattern is painfully obvious. Every holiday, every celebration, every crisis, my sister stood at the center while I moved quietly around the edges. Somewhere between the car keys I never received and the birthday cake I ate alone, I learned exactly where I stood in my family. Late one Wednesday night, a message appeared on my phone. It was from my mom, family meeting Sunday, important. There was no explanation and no question about whether I could attend. It felt less like an invitation and more like a mandatory appointment. When I stepped into the living room that weekend, the atmosphere felt tight with tension. Papers were scattered across the coffee table, late payment notices, bank statements covered in yellow highlighter. My sister sat with her hands clasped tightly together. Her husband avoided looking at me. My parents had positioned their chairs forward like they were about to start a formal meeting. My mom spoke immediately. "There's a serious problem," she said. "Your sister and her husband are having financial trouble." Trouble was an understatement. The mortgage payments were months overdue. The private school tuition for their children hadn't been paid. There was also a legal issue my mom rushed past without explaining clearly. Because of it, my brother-in-law wouldn't be able to work for some time. Every number on those documents pointed to the same conclusion. Everything was about to collapse. My dad exhaled heavily and tapped the stack of bills. "Your mom and I did the calculations," he said. "We can cover some of this, but not all of it. Your sister needs help right now." I waited. I stayed completely still and said nothing. I wanted to see how long it would take for them to finally ask. "Not long at all," my mom leaned forward. "We expect you to handle the rest," she said plainly. "You're single, you have a stable job, you don't have the same expenses they do. It just makes sense." There it was again, the old truth. My sister first, me last. No one asked if I could afford it. No one wondered if I had responsibilities of my own. They simply assumed I would agree. My dad slid a sheet of paper toward me across the table. "This is what needs to be paid immediately," he explained. The list included overdue mortgage payments, school fees, and legal expenses, all highlighted in yellow. My sister spoke softly. "We really need you, Alina." She said it as if her needs were debts I owed her. The room felt strange then. The ticking of the wall clock and the quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Years of old wounds pressed against the same familiar bruise. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply looked at the numbers, then at their faces, and allowed the silence to stretch across the room. They believed I was about to agree. Instead, I said only one thing. "I'll need 48 hours. The drive home was completely silent. I didn't turn on the radio or listen to any podcasts. I just listened to the sound of my old car moving down the road while my mom's earlier words echoed in my mind. "You will always come last." She had said it so casually, like a small comment over dinner, but those words had shaped every decision inside that house for years. Now they wanted me to pretend it wasn't true because they needed something from me. I parked outside my apartment, locked the door behind me, and stood in the quiet space I had built for myself. It was simple and clean. Every piece of furniture, every bill, every decision inside it belonged to me. For years, I had carried their expectations without complaint because arguing felt pointless. But this silence felt different now. It felt clear. I opened my laptop. First, I checked my accounts, my savings, and my investment portfolios. I already knew the numbers by heart. Years of discipline had taught me to track every dollar carefully and invest automatically for the future. I had lived like someone who expected the world to forget about her. That discipline had quietly built a financial foundation that none of my family even knew existed. My fingers moved across the keyboard as I began organizing everything. New folders, new labels. Personal, private, secure. Then I opened my bank records from months and even years ago and moved them into another folder on the screen. After a moment, I gave it a name: Independent. That felt like the right word. On the other side of the room, Maya sat down with a bag of food. She didn't say anything or ask questions. She just watched me like she always did without assuming anything. When she finally walked over, she put her hand on the back of my chair. You are not choosing against them, she said. You are choosing for yourself. I didn't say anything back, but her words made me feel stronger. I opened a spreadsheet next. I made columns and formulas. I wrote down exactly what they asked me for. The house payments, the school costs, the lawyer fees, and the extra monthly money. Numbers do not lie. These numbers were not just a request. They were a plan to change my whole life to save someone else's. For a long time, they called this love or family duty, but I had been paying the full price for a seat I was never allowed to sit in. The cursor on the screen was blinking. I added another section for the terms. If I helped them, and I wasn't sure yet if I would, it would not be the way they thought. It wouldn't be a gift or a sacrifice. I wouldn't let the old cycle continue where my pain was the price of being in the family. I wrote out the plan slowly. It was a loan with interest and a 6-year repayment schedule. They would have to go to financial counseling and family therapy. I wanted a written statement where they admitted to the favoritism I dealt with for 32 years. I wanted a new system for any future requests. Everything had to be in writing with clear limits and no guilt. Each rule was clean and professional. It wasn't about being mean, it was about being fair. I printed the paper and put it away. Then I started on the next part, my boundaries. I went through my banking apps and stopped every automatic payment that was linked to my family. I stopped the holiday money, the extra cash for my sister's kids, and a streaming service my parents used but never paid me back for. These were small things, but they were symbols. They were the little leaks I had allowed for years. Delete, delete, delete. Every time the screen said confirmed, I felt like a weight was being taken off my chest. I went to my email and wrote a short message, saving it as a draft. If they tried to push me, I would send it. It said, I will not take responsibility for choices that I did not make. My apartment was quiet except for the heater turning on. Maya was on the couch now with her legs tucked under her. She was watching me but not interrupting. You have been holding your breath your whole life, she said softly. Tonight is the first time I have seen you actually breathe out. I think she was right. My shoulders felt lower and my jaw wasn't tight anymore. I went back to the table, put the printed papers in a neat pile and tucked them into a plain folder. No big labels, just order. I thought about what would happen tomorrow. My parents would lean forward. My sister would rub her hands together and her husband would make up excuses. They all thought my 48 hours were spent trying to find a way to give them everything. They had no idea that this silence was me getting ready. I closed the folder. I wasn't even mad anymore. You have to have hope to be angry. You have to hope that someone will see you or choose you. I didn't hope for that now. I just wanted the truth and a life that was finally mine. Maya asked quietly, what happens tomorrow? I put the folder in my bag. I tell them that I don't fix what they break anymore. They were already sitting in the same spots when I walked in. It was the same living room and the same chairs pulled forward. The pile of bills was still on the table like an altar they had built for their emergency, but this time I felt different. I wasn't carrying any guilt, I was just carrying my folder. Maya walked in with me, staying quiet and steady. She sat down near the window. She wasn't there to fight. She was just there to see what happened. My mom squeezed her hands together. Good, you are here. Now we can get all of this fixed. My dad let out a breath like he was relieved. We knew you would help us out, Alina. My sister gave me a small, shaky smile. We really appreciate this. They were already thanking me for a choice I hadn't even made yet. I sat down and put my folder on the table. I opened the cover. Inside were my bank statements, my investment records, my retirement accounts, and my stock agreements. Everything was organized perfectly. The mood in the room changed instantly. My mom leaned in and her eyes got small. What is all this? I pushed one page toward her. Context, I said. My dad grabbed another page and looked at the numbers. The sound of the paper moving was the only noise in the room. He stopped moving halfway through. It wasn't just about the money I had. It was the sudden realization that they knew absolutely nothing about my life. Every idea they had about who I was fell apart right there. My mom's voice sounded very thin. Why didn't you ever tell us you were doing this? Well, you never asked, I told her. The silence that followed was heavy. I pulled out the next paper, which was the loan contract. My brother-in-law leaned in, looking confused. Is this a legal contract? I nodded. If you want my money, it won't be a blind sacrifice. There will be a structure. My mom stepped back a bit. Structure for family, for adults, I corrected her. My dad read the page out loud. A 6-year repayment plan, interest, monthly payments, and financial counseling. His voice sounded like it was breaking. It is standard, I said. This is how I help you learn how to not need me again. My sister stared at me with wide, hurt eyes. You are making us sign a document. We are your family. You made me responsible for the choices you made, I said calmly. This paper makes sure that doesn't happen again. Her husband got angry. Does this feel fair to you? I looked right at him. It feels very fair. He stopped talking. I kept going. There is more. I looked at my parents. You will go to therapy. It's not to blame anyone, but to understand the system we have lived in. My mom straightened her back. We are not a dysfunctional family. You told me I was always last. I reminded her quietly. That was dysfunction talking. She looked away. I added, and there will be a public acknowledgement. At the next family party, you will talk about the favoritism, the lack of balance, and how you expected everything from me. My dad shook his head. This is embarrassing. It is just honest, I said. It only feels embarrassing when the truth is too heavy to carry. The room felt like it was getting smaller. Finally, I pushed the last page over. This is what you asked for. The house payments, the school, the lawyer, these are your numbers. This is what your choices cost. The terms were right there in front of them. My mom whispered, you really won't help us unless we sign this. I looked her in the eyes. I told you good to know back at Thanksgiving, and I meant it. Once I figured out my place in this family, I stopped trying to fit into the spot you gave me. If I am always last here, then I have to be first in my own life. Nobody said a word. I reached into my folder one last time and put a pen on top of the contract. It rolled a little and then stopped. You have 48 hours, I said. That is the same amount of time you gave me. My dad swallowed hard. And what if we say no? I stood up and grabbed my bag. Maya stood up too. Then you handle your own emergencies, I said. Just like I had to learn to handle mine, I walked to the door and the room behind me stayed frozen. 8 months passed before I went back to that house. It wasn't for a crisis or a demand. It was for our last scheduled family therapy session. The changes didn't happen in one night, but they did happen. My sister and her husband had signed the papers. Every loan payment showed up on the exact same day every month. They didn't make excuses. The counseling changed how they lived. They spent less money and made better choices. They stopped acting like their needs were the center of the world. My parents changed too, even though it was slow. In therapy, Dr. Holloway helped them use words they had avoided for years. Words like patterns, imbalance, and truth. My mom cried the first time she admitted, we didn't see you. My dad cried when he realized she was right. As for me, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for them either. My life had become much bigger. I moved into a brighter apartment in the city with huge windows. The mornings there felt like a new start instead of a struggle. My desk only had the things that mattered. My computer, a cup, and a plant Maya bought me. She said, every new chapter needs something that is growing. We spent our Sundays walking through different neighborhoods and getting coffee. We talked about the future without comparing it to anyone else's needs. She never asked me to be less than I am. I never expected her to save me. We were just two people building something together. On quiet nights, I would cook while she read on the sofa. Sometimes she would look at me and say, you look lighter. She was right. My shoulders weren't hunched and my hands weren't tight. Silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like air. The bank statements from my sister were tucked away in a drawer. They were just records now, not emotions. They were proof that things could be fair. Before we finished our last session, Dr. Holloway told me this family is learning to walk differently, and you were the one who changed the ground. Driving home that night, the street lights stretched across the road. My apartment was waiting for me, and it was quiet and warm. It was mine for the first time. Nothing felt like it was borrowed. I put my keys on the table. They didn't look like the shiny keys my sister got in the driveway years ago. These keys were quiet, earned, and chosen. I opened the window just enough to feel the cool night air. Maya was in the kitchen humming a song that didn't ask anything of me. Families don't always change because they want to. Sometimes they change because someone finally stops carrying the weight for them. I believed them when they said I was always last. That was the moment I stopped standing in line.